How are we doing today? We're going to go over the bandsaws here, and in our shop we have three different ones. We have the Rockwell, the Rincon, and the Powermatic over here. They're all the exact same. The difference that we have on them is we put a different size blade on each one, so we're not switching them. And the different size blades will determine the radius that you can do with the bandsaw. And the wider the blade will be mostly for resawing, which we'll be going over later on. Now follow me over here. We want to go over and see what a bandsaw actually looks like. This is a bandsaw, and as it says, it is a band. We have an upper wheel and we have a lower wheel. So the blade is like a rubber band, and the teeth should point down. This wheel up here rotates freely. The bottom wheel is attached to the motor, which gives it its speed. Here we have the guard for the blade. So what we can actually do is raise this all the way up if I am cutting a piece of stock that is 6, 7, 8 inches, or what's called resawing. So now we have all this blade exposed. So now I can show you here, these are two blade guides. What they do is guide the blade. The blade is spinning and it wants to keep going this way, but when it comes down, these will help straighten it. In the back, right here, we have, this is called a ball bearing blade support. So when the wood is pushed onto the blade, it will stop it from going back and coming off the wheels. These are set by me, all right? And you want them as close as you can without touching. The only thing that you will be setting is you will be raising and lowering the guard depending on the thickness of your wood. Now this housing right here, there is an identical one right underneath. The blade guides, again, that's straightening out, and behind it is a blade support. All this housing is set by me when I change a blade. So you won't have to adjust them. The only thing you'll adjust, again, is the blade guard depending on the thickness of your wood. So we're going to bring this down. And close her up. Now the bandsaw is mostly designed for cutting curves. You can cut straights with it. So it does have a fence and it does have a miter gauge. So what we can do is if we need to cut several pieces of wood the same size, we can use the miter gauge or the fence. But on the bandsaw, this is one of the only machines you can do freehand sawing. So I don't have to use a miter gauge and I don't have to use the fence. And we'll be doing some cuts in just a minute. Bandsaw blades come in different widths. They also come in with a different number of teeth. Here we have a thin width, and you can see this one's a little dirty, it's used. Wider teeth. This is for cutting very tight radius, tight curves. Here's another one. This one is a 1/2 inch one, and you're going to notice the teeth are finer. This is for larger radii, and then you have a bigger one, about 1 inch, and again, here's some wider teeth spacing, and this is for resawing or larger curves, and then we even have a wider blade. And these blades are used for different purposes. We'll go over those in just a little bit. When we are drawing on the wood, I always prefer a pencil. But for the video that you're going to see, I'm going to use a Sharpie. This will give you an idea of what I'm talking about. That is a tight radius. We would have to have a very small blade or another machine for that. That's a very large radius. Sometimes what we might be doing is irregular work, and what that would be is if I was cutting out something like that. All right? When we have irregular cuts, you do not want to cut as close to the line as possible the first time through. What you want to do is leave a little room. And better yet, what you want to do, what are called relief cuts. What we would do is come straight in. And what that will do is when we go to make our cut, it will relieve the pressure so the blade does not bind in the wood. So when I come over here, this piece right here will fall off and it will make turning much easier. We'll be doing some relief cuts later on. Again, the bandsaw is mostly used for cutting curves, although sometimes we do cut straights, which we will demo in just a little bit. I would like to show you a couple projects that you might want to make using the bandsaw. Here's a simple little bandsaw project. Might look a little complicated, but actually it's not. This is the rose. I had many students in high school make these. They would give them to their mothers for Mother's Day or their girlfriends. Here's a jewelry box. All right, this is another bandsaw project. It's a very easy one. Again, you're noticing curves. This is the machine that you would use to get these curves. Here's another project that used the bandsaw to get the curves. The joints will come from a different machine. This is one of the projects that you'll be doing, incorporating the bandsaw curves and some of the joinery that we'll be learning in the class. All right, now we're ready to set up the bandsaw to use. Remember, eye safety, ear protection, no loose clothing, no jewelry, no long hair. Keep the ground clear of scrap. It's nice to have anti-skid tape. So what we have is, here's our piece of wood that we're going to be cutting. What you'll be doing is setting it up, and what we want to do is raise up the guard no more than 1/4 inch. Your finger should not fit through there. We do not want to have this way up here. This will cut your fingers right off. If you don't believe me, go to a butcher shop. They have this same saw there in the back. They're cutting up all the meat, all right? We do not want to touch this. So what we want to do is have this down, no more than 1/4 inch. Your finger should not be able to fit under that, but the board should be. We want to stand in front of the blade. We do not want to stand to the right-hand side. Sometimes the blades will break. The blade is spinning in a clockward motion, and if it breaks, it wants to come out this way. Two big no-nos. If you have the guard way up and you're standing to the right-hand side cutting and the blade breaks, it will come at you. If the guard is all the way down, it will get stuck up here or down there. We never use the saw with the upper lower wheel guards open or this. Guards must be in place at all times. So that's it. That's the only thing you're going to be setting. All the other adjustments are set for you. We're going to put the mark on with a Sharpie so you can see it. Now, do I want this piece or this piece will depend on what side of the line that I'm cutting on. You want to stay on the side of the line that you don't want. That's the scrap side. So I have that marked and I'm ready to cut. So what we want to do is a nice stance. What we want to keep is our hands to the side. We're never directly in line with the blade. And rule of thumb, keep your fingers 2 inches away from the blade. The table insert is close to that, but it's really a little bit bigger. We don't want to be inside that. Now, when we go, what we're going to do is, this is the hard part. We push forward and slowly turn at the same time. If I turn without pushing forward, you'll hear the machine scream. Again, this is called freehand sawing. So when I get real close to the blade, what I want to do is I want to have nearby push stick. All right? The nice thing about the bandsaw, I can let go of the wood. It's not going to go anywhere. The other machines, you cannot do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these over here, and I'm ready to go. Turn the machine on. Wait for it to come up to speed like all machines. I am slowly pushing forward while turning. The nice thing about the bandsaw is it's freehand sawing. I can let go of the wood. So if I need to go over and grab a push stick, I can. I don't leave the machine though. So I love a little piece of wood so I can get in there and it cuts it. These you can see, they are cut up. Better these than these, all right? So what we want to do, again, we're freehand sawing. I don't need a push stick yet. I keep 2 inches out. All right, now, I haven't thought through the process. So you can hear the machine, it's talking to me. I am gonna turn it off. Never back out of a cut after you've made a curve. When we do a relief cut, which I'll show you, you can go in and come out. But once I've made a curve, if I start to pull back while the blade is running, what I'll do is pull it off the wheels, unsafe. So I stop, wait for the blade to stop, and then what I will do is I will pull it out. So what was happening is, before I said there's different width blades. So the radii here, all right, was too tight for this blade. So what I would want to do is come in a different way or do a relief cut. All I'm going to do is I'm now going to turn the board the other way. Again, right now I'm going to come out. And now what I want to do is I am going to do a couple relief cuts. I pulled this piece of scrap away because it was outside the 2 inches. If it's inside that 2 inches, do not remove it. You can remove it with a piece of scrap wood, but never use your fingers. So now what I'm going to do is come in another direction and it comes off. Turn the machine off. As you can see, I have left the line and then I can sand that down. Now we have 3 bandsaws and we have different size blades on it, but if I was doing a cut like this, all right, I would be real tight with the blade we have on here. I would go to the machine we're going to be doing next is a scroll saw, or I'm going to show you relief cuts. So what I am going to do is I am going to try to come straight in and straight out. Remember, once you make a curve, you can't back out of it unless you turn the machine off and wait for the blade to stop. So turning the machine back on, I'm going to come in. I'm not going to touch my line, just a little bit before it. And back straight out. Straight in, straight out. So now, when I come and start to make the curve, the wood will fall off and it will leave pressure. It won't pinch the blade. Now, before I said those little pieces, do not reach in. If I want to remove them with a piece of wood or a push stick. Do not use your fingers. So now I have my cut. It's not real smooth, and I'll come with a file, or what I can come in and just get rid of a little bit, and it's called nibbling. And all I'm doing is cleaning up. Because basically, what I was doing is really almost straight cuts. A straight cut, straight cut, straight cut. But because the relief cuts were there, it looks like a curve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you if we want to set up the fence to cut pieces of wood or the miter gauge. This is the miter gauge that I showed you before, and it's used on almost all the machines. Here's your miter gauge slot, just slides right in here, and you can turn this at different angles, and here are the degrees. So right now I am set at 27 degrees. So if I wanted to cut this at 27 degrees, I could. Now this isn't the machine I would use. Again, this machine is mostly for curves. I would go to the chop saw, or I would use the table saw, or maybe the radial arm saw, which we will be learning about. So right now, if I was set up and I wanted to cut a bunch of pieces the same size, I could use this and do it. So here we go. Same thing. Keep your fingers 2 inches out. Turn the machine on, wait for it to come up to speed. And here I go, and there's my cut. And I can come back. And I'll just show you if I was cutting something at an angle, you are going to get a fairly accurate cut on this. But if I needed a precision cut, I would go to another machine. So this is the miter gauge. The other one that we have is a fence. I'm going to wait for this to stop. Patience is the name of the game in the wood shop. Measure twice, cut once. Never leave the machine when it's running. Always remove all your scraps. And don't throw them on the ground, because then it's unsafe. Here we have 2 different fences, and the height of it will dictate depending on the size of the wood you're doing. So I could have it in this position or this position. This fence is for this machine here. The bigger one where we do resawing with is over for the Powermatic back here. So depending on what I'm doing, I would put in this position, or I would slide it in this position. So we just slide it in, tighten it. So this is set for cutting wood that is about 2.5 inches or higher. If I was going to use this, what I need to do now is raise the guard. So the wood can come over, and I can slide this over. Sometimes when I'm resawing, I will be cutting very thin. And what resawing is when you're taking a piece of wood and standing it up. So instead of going over and planing this down, which is a waste of a lot of wood, what I would do is set this up, and I'm going to resaw it. So what I am going to do is cut it vertically. We don't need the miter gauge. All right, now you always want to think out your process on what you're going to do. So when resawing, I need to keep this against the fence. I also need to push it forward. Before I start, what am I going to do when I get in this position? I am not putting my finger here. Remember, the 2 inch, I got to stay 2 inches out. So I either need another push stick or a piece of wood. So what I am going to do is have another piece of wood. I like wood. A lot of people like the push sticks. You're going to find out what's comfortable for you. So I keep it on this side of the fence, not this side of the fence. This is where we're cutting. We keep all our supplies on the other side of the fence so it can't come into the blade. So now I'm ready to go. So what I'm going to do, I'm holding this in against the fence. Now this is what's really neat on the bandsaw. Look at that. I've now made a nice thin piece of wood. So instead of trying to take a full piece of wood and planing it down, what I can do is I can now cut several pieces of wood the same size. I'm now going to resaw this again. So now I have two thinner pieces, and if I need to, I can glue these together. Resawing is a great thing. That's where we really use the fence. The bandsaw is a very versatile machine. The other thing that we can do is we can actually tilt the table. We don't do that very much, but what we're going to do is show you how to do that. If you're going to do that, please let me know so I can come over and make sure it's done correctly. Before we had the fence where it was up vertical for resawing, I've just turned this, so if I was going to cut a bunch of pieces of wood to a set size, I don't want to have it way up there again. It's exposed where I can get cut. So I'm just going to show you if I was cutting a bunch of pieces of wood to the same size. All right, again, push stick. Think through your process. When I come here, how am I going to get that out? Rule of thumb, 2 inches. Don't want to cut that thumb. Turn it on against the fence, and I'm pushing it. Now I can leave that there and just let the wood push out the next one. So now what I've done is, that's called ripping. I have ripped a bunch of pieces the same width. Again, it's not the machine I would use. I would use the table saw, but sometimes when you're using small little pieces, this is the machine to use, where the table saw, when you're cutting small pieces, is a little dangerous. Again, wait for the machine to totally stop. Oh, I can just go get it now. No, it's still get a nice cut on your finger. So now what we've done is we've made several pieces of wood, 3, the exact same size. So sometimes what you are doing is you are resawing using the fence, or you're cutting pieces of wood usually to the same size. As I said before, every bandsaw is a little different, but they can all do the same things. What I'm going to do is loosen this, and then what I'm going to do is tilt the table. Again, down here, I can go to a set increment. So if I want to cut at 10 degrees or 30 degrees, and then what I would do is lock it back in. So now what I have is the table is at an angle to the blade. We don't do that very often here. We have other machines that do a much better job. But if you have this machine at home, you need to be able to learn all these different, what we call tricks, or different methods on using the machine. Again, freehand sawing, so if I wanted to cut at an angle, we can tilt the fence. We'll do a quick cut, and that will be it for the bandsaw. Again, what you want to do is put your wood down and bring the guard down so it is, and I want you to say it before I do. How high above the wood should the guard be? If you said 1/4 inch, you were correct. You don't want to be able to put your finger underneath that. So there I'm set, and then again, turn the machine on. Wait for it to come up to speed. Keeping my fingers 2 inches out. So what I've actually done is cut the wood, but if you notice, it's at a bevel. It's at a slight angle. And that is the bandsaw. It's a great machine.